Hi everyone, I'm Nima Sherpa. I'm a mountaineer from Nepal, and you're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing.
Yeah. My name is Abhay and I share conversations with talented and interesting individuals linked to the global Indian and South Asian community. It's informal and informative, adding insights to our evolving cultural expressions, where each person can proudly say, "Trust me, I know what I'm doing." Welcome, everybody, to this episode of Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. I'm really thrilled and honored to be joined by Nima Sherpa. Nima, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Abhay, for having me here. Yeah.
Yeah, this is really a treat. And we were just, talking a little bit about one of your more recent expeditions that didn't necessarily go, as planned, given elements and all the things you were just mentioning. But walk me through what it's like not to necessarily have accomplished what you feel like on the mountain, especially. I mean, especially this most recent trip at Manaslu. This didn't necessarily go as you had planned, and yet there is something that you're learning from that. So tell me a little bit more about what it's like to not necessarily summit, but still learn.
Yeah, actually, to be honest, this was the best expedition that I had done so far. There are many reasons why, but mostly because when I started my climbing career as a journey, and every day was just like successful summit, you know. So I started with Manaslu. To be honest, it was my
Yeah.
first mountain that I climbed in normal season. It was a success, and then I climbed Everest, Lhotse, and then in Pakistan. So every time it was just like a success, you know.
Yeah.
And even for me, it was always about I believe that I could summit and I could come back safe, or else I wouldn't risk my life, you know, in that sense. So I
Sure.
always knew I was gonna summit all the mountains. So that's how the project started, and I did climb all the 14 highest peaks. And you know, once you reach a certain pinnacle, you get such a high dopamine that you know everything else seems so less interesting to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, after all this crazy 2 years happened to me, that I tried now something different, which was to climb in winter. And
Yeah.
what this means was basically there are many different stages that you can climb as a mountaineer. So one, you can climb commercially. So you pay someone, a company, they have a base camp set up for you. The rope is fixed. This is one way. The other
Yeah.
is okay. You can take certain service from them, but you choose to climb without oxygen. You choose to climb without a guide. So this is another way. And the third
Yeah.
is it's called alpinist. So this is when you choose to do everything by yourself, and you have no guide. You have no oxygen bottles. You have no fixed rope. Everything depends on you. And so I
Yeah.
had climbed in all this style. I had been a client. I had been a Sherpa. I had been a expedition organizer. I had now this was my another step, which was to be an alpinist, to be an explorer.
Mm.
So even here, I thought, okay, I would summit, everything would be great, and that was my initial mindset. But somehow things didn't got like as planned as I thought, you know. So after climbing all the 14, I went to climb Mount Amadavalam in winter, which I failed. It's a 6,800-meter peaks. I failed there.
Yeah.
Again, went back to climb Manaslu and failed there as well. And
Yeah.
it was very I don't know. I think it was good for me in a way that I had something to look upon for the next few years. You know, after
Yeah.
climbing 14 and getting all the attention and all that, so I have now something else to look upon. And the
Yeah.
most important thing for me was I was with a climber who is my mentor, and he's
Yeah.
almost 60 years old. His name is Simone Moro from Italy. He's known as one of
Mhm.
the best alpinists in the history. Um, so yeah, I got to learn a lot from him, and this was something that I always needed in life. To be honest, it was mentorship. So
Yeah.
I always look upon someone to get mentorship. So yeah, this was all about learning and just realizing
Yeah.
that you could fail. Yeah.
Sometimes, youth makes people assume, maybe naively, that there is a lot more risk taking and that you people are impulsive and they don't know necessarily how. And so it's good that it's interesting you mentioned mentorship as an important part of this entire experience. So as someone who is relatively younger, what has youth and mountaineering experiences, what has that taught you about humility and being honest with conditions, being honest with yourself, being honest and open, particularly when it comes to what limits you might have in an experience or in a journey.
Yeah, I think when you are like young, when you're especially in your teenage, you have so much of mental capacity to learn, and you have so much energy, and you are very optimistic about life. But as I have seen the pattern, as you slowly grow up, people start to get demotivated about life. A lot of problems
Yeah.
come here and there, because I know this, because when I'm on expedition, I'm the youngest one, and I'm climber
Right.
30 years old, 40 years old, so I get to learn a lot from them, hearing about the teenage life, the work life. So I understood all this within these 2 years of my life. That's why
Yeah.
sometimes I felt disconnected with my age group in that sense.
Mm.
Because my age group friend, I was not friend with them. Like, to be honest, I was more into expedition, and all my friends were like 30 years plus. So
Right. Older.
like, yeah. So for me, it was always I got to learn what was gonna happen to me in the future, and
Yeah.
I took it like a very simply, and I always the mindset to learn something from it.
Yeah.
And then I saw a lot of people, especially in the teenage, getting lost, getting the family pressure about careers and all this. And to be honest, for me, it was very good decision that I took mountaineering, because once you are in this certain harsh condition, once you are, you are so much of suffering, and once you come back to city, everything feels so easy. The life here,
Yeah.
so everything is so much privileged. That's, I think, you get to learn how privileged you are in that sense. After you experience the whole journey of traveling to Pakistan for 1 month, and going to extreme places and learning about all
Yeah.
these things, it just makes you wonder. Like, it makes your mind broader. So I think this is what I learned personally as a youth. Yeah.
I mean, the environment itself makes you humble, and you have to almost be very, very honest and open about yourself. There's no reason for anything to hide. You can't hide any place, right? When especially you're
Yeah.
on the mountain. But in a way, does that actually make you now take risks a little bit differently? Do you look at just taking risks differently, especially compared to when you first started climbing as a professional? I mean, I imagine that people just age differently when they're on the mountain, particularly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you talk about risks, to be honest, I haven't taken any unnecessary risks so far in my life. Every risk that
Yeah.
I take, it was always like very strategic risk. So for example, I had the weather report in front of me. I knew what was gonna happen. Of course, there are some risks that you cannot control in the mountain, as in life. For example, in the mountain,
Right.
sometimes avalanche might come out of nowhere. The weather might get worse, even if you know it was not gonna be bad.
Yeah.
So I think there's two things that I learned from here. One is that I knew I was prepared enough, that I knew what was going to happen. So I took the risk in that sense. But at the
Hmm.
same time, if something goes wrong, I also knew that, okay, this is the way life it works. So I'm not surprised when something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And yeah, now, as you told, the risks that I've taken, it just makes my mind so like everything that I want to do in life now, it has to make some meaning for me, because I know what I've went
Yeah.
through in the mountains. So when I come back to city, everything that I try to do, it has to have some impact in life, not just in my life, but also in my family and
Yeah.
community wise. Yeah.
Which is sometimes different from other people your age, because they may look at risk very differently than someone who's had all these experiences on the mountain. In a way, do you feel like you said, you have had experiences with people who are much, much older than you, and yet the mountain also keeps you very, very humble and open, and it almost allows you to have a different perspective on taking risk compared to people your age who are not necessarily climbers.
Yeah, so if you talk about the mountain itself, see, I think everybody get attracted to mountain in some ways. Somebody wants to
Yeah.
go trekking, somebody wants to just see it, somebody wants to climb it, somebody just wants to, talk about it. So I think mountains have
Yeah.
always attracted human beings, because we are part of the nature, and
Yeah.
mountain is the biggest natural structure in the nature. So of course you get attracted because you are from the nature. So you cannot
Yeah.
you cannot run away from the nature. Of course, today's world is all about technological advancement, AI, which I'm very interested, to be honest. I'm not just a guy
Yeah.
living on a rock. I'm also very
Right.
interested in
Right.
AI, what's happening in Silicon Valley. So I'm interested in
Yeah.
that as well. But at the same time, I'm very connected with the nature. I like to be very connected with the nature, because I think it just
Yeah.
makes you realize how big the universe and nature is, and you're just a very small part of it. So you don't have
Yeah.
to
It's great to
everything.
stay grounded.
Yeah.
You have had a front row seat to the mountain your entire life. I mean, you have such a amazing family background when it comes to climbing and mountaineering, and you've grown up around this. can you recall or even share a little bit about what maybe some of your first memories are of climbing?
Yeah, so I always knew Sherpa was climbers, in that sense, because everybody was talking about Sherpas and in the country itself, because when Tenzing Norgay Sherpa, when he climbed Everest for the first time in the history with Sir Edmund Hillary, that was a
Yeah,
very big moment in the history of exploration, not just mountaineering. It was similar to like landing in moon, so it was similar to that.
sure. Yeah,
So that's why the Sherpa name became a brand. So I always had that consciousness in my mind that okay, Sherpas are known as a climber, but even in my family, I always saw my dad, leaving very early and going to
yeah,
expeditions and coming back and telling the stories about all this. So yeah, it was in my mind, and I could see my uncle, so many my relatives getting involved, but I never knew what was the industry, how it's working, what's an
yeah,
athlete, an explorer. So later on, when I got inside myself like into the industry, then I found out so many things are happening. So you have Sherpa as an guide, you have Sherpa as an business
yeah.
operator, you have Sherpa as an like so many things. So that's when I thought, okay, this is the reality, and that's how I was so interested, now more interested into climbing. And yeah, ever since I've always been with my community and been as an
Mm,
athlete. Yeah, just
yeah.
taken the next year.
Do you remember? I mean, like some people will say that, like, yeah, if they're a basketball player, that when I was in fourth or fifth grade and I started playing, and this was when I knew. Was there a moment that when you were climbing that you knew that this was something that you needed to really pursue? It was kind of a calling for you. I mean, how old were you, maybe?
Yeah.
When you sort of in your head knew that like this is something that I really really love and I want to do this full time.
Yeah, to be honest, I was always into sports, but I never thought about being a mountaineer, even though my whole family is
Interesting.
from mountaineering.
Yeah.
And but I was always intrigued by like exploration side. When I saw movies like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, those kind of movies always made me feel
Yeah.
something that I didn't know if I was gonna be in the future a mountaineer or an explorer, but it made me feel something about life, a hope or an adventure. But I was
Yeah.
more interested in doing like a athlete sport in that sense. Like playing football
Yeah.
was my main
Mm.
thing. But when
Yep.
I finished my grade 10th standard, and when I started into photography and filming, then I slowly went to trekking. I started filming others, photographing others. Then I realized, okay, maybe I want to try this as well. I just don't want like always to click photos of other climbing, as maybe I would try to climb myself as well,
Right.
you know? So
Yeah.
that's when I told me and my dad and my mom, we all had a conversation, and it was a very weird conversation in that sense because they never expected me to be a mountaineer also.
Yeah.
You
Was it
know,
really a surprise to them that they didn't expect this?
Yes, because I think our like thought was okay. I finish my school, then I go to some foreign countries. I do some graduation there, and I get a
Yeah.
job. Something it was. I don't know. It was something like that. But I don't know. I just
Yeah.
somehow felt connected that okay, I should go back to what my dads were doing, my uncles, because it sounded more adventure to me. To be honest, I think it
Yeah.
had more meaning in my community, in my country, and in my life. So I think that's
Yeah.
how I chose mountaineering. And that's why even when I started the project to climb all the 14 highest peak, I named it Sherpa Power because I was like, okay, this is it's all about the community for me, and yeah, that's how it
Mm.
started. Yeah,
Do you feel like you mentioned that you are interested in so many other things, right? Whether that's
yeah,
sports or football or cricket or technology and Silicon Valley. Do you feel that because you made this choice and you've had such a great success from there, did you feel like you had to sacrifice something that, hey, I'm leaving some of these other things behind?
yeah. Of course, I knew I was sacrificing a lot of things, but I never regret those things. To be honest,
Yeah.
okay, I sacrificed my school. To be honest, I had the high school experience.
Yeah.
Which could be, I don't know. I never thought that it would I would miss it, to be honest, because I
Yeah.
knew I had to sacrifice, so I sacrificed
Sure.
a lot of happy moments with my friends, hanging out. I had no zero of that, always
Right.
about exploration, going somewhere out. So yeah, at
Yeah.
the same time, to be honest, when I come back from the mountain alive with all my fingers and hands safe,
Yeah.
I feel like I'm living an extra life. So I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know what's happening, and I'm always like looking for something new, learning about something like, let's say, even like what's happening in US or what's happening in any other country. I'm always learning in that sense because I knew I have extra
Yeah.
life now. I'm safe
Yeah,
back home.
it's
So
almost fueled and added that much more curiosity to
yeah,
experience all those other things too. I'm curious about one thing. Sometimes people very naively, if they're new to this or they hear about this, they don't really know much necessarily about climbing or expeditions and mountaineering. They might think that, okay, here's this guy, he's climbing, he makes it to the top, he stays there, summits, and then he comes back down. And
Yeah.
obviously, there's a lot more involved, right? I mean, there's just so much planning, so much preparation. So it takes quite a bit to, like you said, make it back down alive. Um, how has this entire experience of mountaineering and all that you've accomplished so far, what's it maybe taught you about being both a better leader and
Mhm.
also a better teammate when it comes to
Yeah.
this profession?
Yeah, so the thing about mountaineering is that it's not a televised sport or anything like that. It's very, it's like a mystery. You don't know what's happening there.
Yeah,
And so everybody is curious about what's happened. So ever since when the mountaineering started, from the Alps to Himalayas, it has always been about countries wanting to conquer a mountain. At that time it was about conquering. Today I don't like the
yeah,
word conquer, to be honest. But at
yeah,
that time it was about like because a mountain was going to be claimed by a country. So Everest was a British mountain. British wanted to
yeah,
climb Everest, and India wanted to climb Kanchenjunga. So every country has wanted to claim a mountain. France wanted to climb Annapurna, so which they did, and so it was like that. Like it was everybody, a country wanted to own a mountain. So it started with that, and once it finished, once all the mountain was climbed by a country, then it started. Okay, some people said, okay, we don't need 200-300 people climbing a mountain. Maybe one guy can climb it. So that's when
yeah.
another journey started in the world of mountaineering. That's when the alpinism came. That's when people like
Mm,
Reinhold Messner came into the Himalayas. And they soloed mountain. They climbed Mount Everest without anyone being around. They climbed. So
yeah.
that's how it started. And after that, what happened was all the mountain was climbed in that sense. And then
Mm,
suddenly, Polish people said, okay, I think we can climb in winter as well. So that's when all the
mm,
mountain was climbed in winter, and yeah, so that's everything was finished. And then came another big movement, which was about commercial climbing. Then people realized, okay, mountain is not actually that dangerous, so maybe we can all climb. So that's when
yeah,
many people started a business around mountaineering, and that's when the expedition company started to took place. That's when people hired someone else to for the
mm,
tour expedition. So yeah, it has taken a lot of stages in the world of mountaineering, which I'm very fascinated about. And
yeah.
um, and I have been part
Have
of all.
you? a-
Yeah.
and I was going to say, has that history and that evolution? Have you therefore become a better leader because you know how this has evolved, and have what have you learned maybe about being a better teammate when it comes to
Yeah,
doing this?
so yes, I was telling you because when you run expedition, of course you see maybe 200 people summit, 300 people summit, but behind that there
Yeah,
is like 1,000 people or kitchen.
right.
There's like kitchen staff, there is base camp manager, the Sherpa guides, team leader who's looking at your weather report, your summit windows. There is a lot of preparation behind it. Of course, when people summit, they would say, "Okay, I submitted," and there is no credit given to other people.
Yeah,
But you have to understand that there is a lot of people working behind the scenes. From
yeah,
ground level porter to guides to all the things that are happening. So which I realized very soon. So when I started climbing, that's the reason I named the whole project around the Sherpa, because I had to give
yeah,
some credits to this guy, to my people.
yeah,
So in that
yeah.
sense, yeah, yeah.
Well, that's great. I mean, and that you say that with so much pride. I can certainly feel that. And each peak, I'm sure, is a little bit different. But is there something that you do, or some way that you feel, or something that you even might say at every summit? Do you have some sort of ritual that maybe almost like is something that you reproduce each time there's a success, and not just for you, but for every one of those people who maybe you represent, especially when you're summiting?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't think too much in the mountains. That's I'm being very honest with you. When I'm in the
Yeah,
mountain, I know that I have to keep myself safe, my teammates safe, and
yeah,
people in the mountain safe. That's our agenda. We don't have many. We're not there to say like, "Oh, I'm gonna motivate people. I'm gonna do this that." We're not there to
yeah,
do that. We're just there. We're being very honest with ourselves. So I think that's how I've seen mountaineering. So when I climb a mountain, I
yeah,
have a very big preparation. I pray for it and I climb it, then I finish. I don't go back and saying I did this, I did that. I just
yeah.
next project for me, it's all about next.
Right.
What's next? So yeah.
That's great. Yeah, and I almost feel like that's the only way for it to be successful, and that for you to have almost like a discipline around it.
Yeah, because I feel like if I keep on reminding myself about the past, I'm always gonna be stick to that achievement. I'm never gonna get myself taking more risks in the future. So
Yeah.
I have to have that sense of what I can do next. So
Yeah.
that's always have been my way of life. Yeah.
That idea of what can you do next, and even that discipline, I imagine that that's something that you had to learn. And so do you now maybe train or prepare differently today as compared to when you first started?
I think my values have always been the same, to be honest.
Yeah.
I always reminded myself, okay, you don't have to complain too much in life. That
Yeah.
was not number one thing, because when you are in the suffering in the mountain, you have to. You see, I just remind myself like what's happening in the reality. We have to understand the reality of the world. There is
Mm.
so much. There is, I think, currently more than 70 plus active war happening in the world. There is so much of kids who live in poverty. There's so much of countries. So those people, they never chose to be in that scenario. They were just born in
Yeah.
it, right? But like I had the privilege, I had to choose. I can study, I can climb. So this is in my boundary. So I think I understood that since very young age, to be honest, that I had that freedom and I have to use it in the right ways. That has always been my value. But
Yeah.
training wise, professional wise, of course, I had to learn a lot of things. I had to go a lot of training and physicality, mentality. It was one aspect, but the other aspect I told you was also realizing how much freedom that I had as an individual and just using
Yeah.
that for my momentum. Yeah.
That's great. I love how you particularly were sharing that you represent so much, right? I mean, the Sherpa name, just the idea of what it means to be a mountaineer and a climber, especially in Nepal. Mountaineering in Nepal, sports in Nepal, Nepali athletes, you represent all of these entities. And this happens with each journey and each climb and each summit. And while there's a pride involved in all of this, these are also opportunities, and
Yeah.
they're opportunities for sponsors and brands and economic advancement. Um, what does success in this ecosystem of climbing look like for a Sherpa, for a Nepali man or woman in 2025? What should it look like for that matter?
Yeah, of course. As you told, mountaineering and tourism is a very big aspect of Nepal. We're
Yeah.
not a country who are like very advanced in technology or military, but we have a very huge amount of natural things around us. So like a lot
Yeah.
of national parks, a lot of beautiful mountains. 8 of the 14 highest mountains are in Nepal, and a lot of 6,000 meter peaks. So we have to be proud of what we have.
Yeah.
And so I've always seen that. And to be a Sherpa, in this community, it means that once you are a successful guide, you are known as a successful person in this our community.
Yeah.
Once you are a guide who is making good amount of money because your whole family depends on you. You come from a village, you have no study, and you make it big in life. You have many people who are who depend on you to climb for their own dreams, and you make their dreams successful. And
Mm.
you come from, as I told you, you come from a village with a very less privilege, no education, your whole family depending upon you. So once you become that successful person, once you can take care of yourself and the family, it means you're successful in life, to be honest.
Yeah.
For an average Nepali, here. And for me, it was also about realizing how much my parents has done. So, like, for example, if you talk about my father and my uncles, they started from a village and they started as a guide. My uncles, they started as a porter and they become a guide, became leaders. Now they own one of the largest expedition company in Nepal, and not just in Nepal, we do expedition all over the world. And for me, it
Yeah.
was like, okay, what I can do from here. Okay, they have
Yeah.
did this much, what I can do. So I thought like, okay, they have done so much for the guiding industry. I have to do something for the next generation of Sherpas to be more like an athlete. So I'm not
Mm.
saying athlete is better, a guide is worse. I'm just saying it's like a diversity. You can be both. You know,
Yeah.
you can be a guide. You can also be an athlete. When you are an athlete, it means you have your own project. You have your own freedom to do something. You have sponsors. You have a name for yourself in that scenario. So I
Yeah.
always thought like, okay, I have to be in this spectrum. I have to improve
Yeah.
improve this because my family has already done so much for this industry. So I have to kind of go here. Not saying I'm better or worse. I'm just evolving in this sense. Yeah.
Which is great. Yeah, no, you're leading in that. And what's missing maybe? Western athletes and Western sponsorships seem like they have opportunities that are matched pretty well. And yet for Nepali Sherpas and athletes, maybe there's a gap, and maybe that's improving, but what needs to happen so that more recognition and prominence and economic success can happen for Nepali athletes and Nepali Sherpas and Nepali
Yeah.
climbers to basically be recognized as leaders in this space?
Yeah, so for the like last 2.5 years or 3 years, every day I was writing hundred of emails to many, brands and talking
Right.
about the project or my future, what's gonna happen, and so. But even today, if I'm being honest, I have zero sponsors. I'm being very
Yeah.
frankly, and all my
Yeah.
expedition was, of course, it was very easy for me because my family already had a organization which I could be part of, and as a guide or as a client, so I already had that facility. But for me, it was not just about me. I was like, okay, if I could
Mm.
have some sponsorship, I could kind of get the next generation could kind of get an opportunity and saying like a belief. Okay, we have someone from us who looks like us, who is from this community, who is at that level, and we can be that. So that was my initial idea. And but now I feel like we also have to be we have to do something else in that scenario because now we have done things differently. So
Yeah.
rather than just asking for sponsorship from companies, what I'm thinking now is, we are a brand ourselves. Our family, we already
Yeah.
have so many things. So we can do things in our own also. We can make our own brand in that scenario as well. We always don't have to depend on somebody and always ask for help for somebody. We have to be capable of ourselves. We cannot
Yeah.
always have the victim mentality. So now I think that's how I've been looking forward for my coming years. And I feel like our family now, we are trying to build our own clothing line, our own thing, and our always motive will be to support others who didn't have the support. So I feel like this is also making me more interested into marketing. That the fact that we have a responsibility.
Mm.
So yeah, now I'm not gonna complain about this. They didn't support me. They didn't support me. I just feel like, okay, I'm here, and let's see what we can do.
Just right. If it's if there's a big vacuum, you start to fill it. Right. You do it
Yeah,
yourself.
yeah,
I'm one thing that's sort of inspiring about that is also the responsibility that comes with being in this ecosystem, being in this industry. The more connected climbers become, the more attracted they become even to a brand like yours, and they get really, really motivated to try and climb and get more economic success there. The more access we have to other audiences and markets, and as your whole industry grows, those opportunities grow. And yet there's a risk of having, a minimizing of the culture of Nepali culture or Sherpa culture. And you might maybe leave that behind. So you're part of a new generation
yeah.
that is starting to claim some of this. How do you make sure that, the brand and the culture still stays as a Sherpa culture, as a Nepali culture, and that people don't
Yeah,
forget that?
yeah. I think to be honest, I have seen this in my generation especially. I think many people, they like they feel shy to express themselves. I've seen this in today's generation, and they feel
Yeah.
shy to express their culture in that sense. Because they feel like, okay, they are more influenced by the Western or this and that other cultures, and they somehow lose their own culture. Because they feel like if they don't become a part of that big culture, they cannot be part of the society. So I think this is a
Yeah.
very wrong concept. Okay, I get it. You feel insecure because your friends, and all that. But at the same time, I feel like you have to slowly start to realize that we as an individual, everybody has their own way of growing up, their own family background, culture, and that's what makes us unique and individual. That's why we want to travel to other places to learn about those places. That's
Yeah.
why I'm very interested in traveling, because I feel like I could learn something from there, something new, something that keeps me excited as a human being. Something to
Yeah.
learn from each other, and yeah, I think we have to understand that. Yeah,
Which is great. Yeah. And I mean, it also is an opportunity for not only for you to learn about other places, other cultures, but there are opportunities for those people now to learn about you and who
hmm,
you are and your background.
yeah,
Let me ask you something a little bit different. There's so much attention now, important attention that's paid to all the environmental cost of this. There's so much traffic in these areas, climbing. There's so much trash and garbage and
yeah,
pollution that's generated by the industry. And yet, if you close it off, if you stop the tourism, and if you allow less climbers, it may also decrease the amount of money that
yeah,
flows into these and the attention that the industry generates. How do you balance and fix that?
Yeah,
On the
I
one
think
hand, you need to, you're right. I mean, is there a solution here?
yes, of course. I do believe in solution and goodness, and I feel like there is a lot of elements to this. If you see it layer by layer, so like there's like the biggest element you could say is climate change. Which everybody
Yeah,
knows about, everybody talks about, but you have to understand the reality. You have to know what is truth and what is not. And the reality is, if you talk about Nepal itself, Nepal contributes 0.0.3, I don't know, some emissions to the whole global carbon emissions, but
yeah,
Nepal, India, and these countries will face the most problem because we have the whole Himalayan range, we have the Hindu glacier, so everything is here in this region.
yeah,
So we suffer from this. So this is one big aspect, and in this aspect, we cannot do much about ourselves because we don't have many big industries which we can shut down, and tomorrow everything is gonna be fine. This is
right.
not this is not what we can play in. So it has to come
Yeah,
from a bigger level of power. So this is not
sure.
something that we have, but of course there are other aspects to this, which you said, like the trash problem. This
Yeah,
is where we can take small part in it. And
yeah,
this is where I'm also interested because I understand we have gotten so much from mountains, and it has given us so much, not just for us, for the country, and for the whole world.
yeah,
And so yeah, now okay, if I tell you what we are doing in that sense, I could say I'm very proud in that now from this year, which I'm also going this season, we are implementing technology to kind of conserve the nature. How it
uh,
means is we are last year we tested a
yeah,
drone which can carry like 15 kg at that altitude, at like 6,000 meter altitude, which is a
yeah,
very big, and the drone, it goes 100 times faster than a human, um,
yeah,
because when you're traveling to mountain, it's not a straight path. There's ups and down and zig and zag, but the
sure.
drone just goes in a straight line.
Yeah,
So I got very fascinated by this idea. Okay, if we could use drone to kind of clean up the mountain, because it's a lot faster than human being and it's much safer than human being. So
sure.
this was so I met this company Airdift, and they had been working on this for 10 years developing drones, and but they didn't had a voice. Then it's okay, then they approached us, and then I told, okay, this is very fascinating for me, and this is something that I
Mm,
would love to advocate for, and that's what we are doing from this season. We are using drones, and I feel like it's very easy for us. If we have the
yeah.
right access and right paperwork, then we can clean the mountains in very fast, and we can keep it very safe for future generation, and I'm very positive about it. I don't think it's a big problem or anything like that. So this is something
Do
that
you,
we will be doing. Yeah.
yeah, and do you think that at some point you need to limit how many people can access the mountain and not necessarily
um
have as many climbers?
yeah, so I think this is not something that we should do, because if I told honestly, it's just
Yeah,
one mountain, Everest, but the remaining mountains, they don't have much tourism in that place. If you go to
yeah,
Annapurna, if you go to Dhaulagiri, there is still people who have small tea houses, maybe two
yeah,
three tourists per day. So you have to be very smart, and but the thing we can do is we can distribute the tourism from one place to the whole Nepal, which we are planning to do in the future. This is one of my future planning is to
yeah,
contribute to tourism in that sense. So as I told you, the problem is not about over tourism. The problem is over tourism in one place, which we have to
yeah,
distribute, and then it's a more safer way to do. But of course, if you see about tourism, what tourism does to Nepal is the moment a tourist land to airport, the airlines is getting money, the taxi driver is getting paid, the hotel is getting
yeah.
paid, the porter is getting paid, so everyone is getting paid in that scenario. So we cannot say, okay, tomorrow you don't come here. So
Mm,
and at the same time, we cannot say people not to fulfill their dreams.
yeah,
We are not there to control anyone from nature. So as I told you, the problem is very simple. We just have to see
yeah.
what we can do to solve it. Yeah.
Let me ask you a couple of very rapid fire questions because I'm
Yeah.
just so interested in what you have to say on this one. Um, what was your favorite climbing moment with your dad?
Yeah, if you talk about climbing moment, I think it was always that my dad was someone that I looked upon a lot. And
Yeah,
I really enjoy when I talk about his journey from a village boy to successful businessman. And
yeah,
this is a journey that makes me very motivated every day when I think about how he did it. Because there is no
yeah,
pattern to how he did it. Did he get educated?
yeah,
Did he had a mentor? Did he? We don't know what's going through his mind when he did this journey.
yeah.
So this is something that I always look upon him, and that's why I'm always motivated when I'm around him. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you ever summited together? Is there a particular moment or a particular summit that you've
No, no,
done together that's
I think we have a plan in the future for this, but he's
okay?
always busy somewhere, and he's always. But of course, he has always been there to manage my weather report, to manage everything for me in that scenario. He has been my support, you know. So
Yeah. So there's a collection of moments, looks like.
yeah, yeah, it's a
Um,
lot of things. Yeah.
yeah. And this is maybe an odd question, but do you actually have a favorite or most memorable injury that you've ever gotten?
Yes, to be honest, I remember very clearly when I was in Pakistan, when I was climbing this mountain called Nanga Parbat,
Yeah.
which was, and me and my climbing partner Pasang, we were together, and the last 700 meter we climbed without any rope.
Mm,
And but we just had a very thin rope connected between us. And while coming down, because there was no rope and the path was very icy and all the stones were there, so I slipped, you know,
yeah.
and I just screamed his name, and he also listened. He also fell down, and we both fell down. I think 5 meters, something like that, and then we both had an ice axe, which we stopped, and the degree was very slopey, and that was the moment we realized something happened. But of course, we
Yeah.
stand and we just okay, and let's go down. So we were
Yeah.
like that because we felt very safe with each other. And
Okay.
yeah, there are many experiences like that which I remembered. But of course, as I told you, I always feel safe because I'm with people who love me and who I care for around me. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. What's your favorite meal to have when you're summiting? What's your go-to? Like everyone, hey, this is what I always have. This is my tried and true. What's your favorite something to eat, particularly when you're
Yeah,
when you're
I don't
on
know,
summit?
not about food, but of course, I do always like to drink coffee. Because
Ah,
I don't know if it's psychological or I feel like I would get a lot of energy from it if I drink proper 2 cups
yeah.
of coffee. So of course, I always try to give myself, whenever I summit, I drink coffee and then I feel energy and yeah, and then we go.
All right. So it's no different when when you're up in above 8,000 meters or not. So that's actually good to know. And by the
Yeah.
way, I mean, is there a particular like? Do you have to be very very careful about your food when you're up there? When you're on the expedition?
Yeah, of course. One of the big problem might be that some people might not have a very good immune system, and
Yeah.
as you go higher, when you have less oxygen, your
Yeah.
body feels less immune. So yeah, you might get food poisoning, you might get diarrhea, you might get so many problems.
Mm,
But which I never had too much of that. I feel like my immune system is pretty good. So whatever I
yeah.
eat, my body try to consume it good enough. But of course, that was talking about myself. But many people do face the problems,
Mm,
and even me, I try to be also aware that if some things might cause me some problem in my stomach, which might have cause me more in my summit push. But to be honest, we don't have a luxury of what we can eat and what we cannot eat in the mountains. We have a very limited
true.
amount of weight to carry, and within that
Yeah.
limited amount of weight, we have to carry salt, sugar, some drinks, some food. So everything is very limited, which I like about mountaineering, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Keep it simple, right? And at least make sure you have your coffee.
Yes, that's the number one tip.
That's the number one, right? Okay, speaking of number one, what's your number one song right now on your playlist?
I think I'm more into now Bob Dylan. So it's something. So
Okay.
there was a movie from Timothy Chalamet. I think
Yeah.
Complete Unknown. So I've been more getting into it. So I see. I've always liked the songs like old songs than today's songs like Queens and Beatles, and they
Yeah.
like it's more of a melody to me. So yeah, right now I'm into Bob Dylan. I think yeah, for a while.
All right. That's great. I'm not sure I would have guessed that. So that's terrific. I'll
Yeah.
I'll get you out of here on this. Something that I'm fascinated by, right? When you train to live above that 8,000 meter line
Mhm.
and you have to combat fatigue and hypoxia and extreme weather and extreme cold and wind and even just this, not just all those physical elements, but this overwhelming feeling of perhaps giving up or giving in to
Mhm.
all the elements.
Yeah.
How have you, at this age, um, how do you stay motivated? How do you mentally stay both strong and yet very peaceful at the same time?
Yeah, I think, of course, the most important thing I think is your mentality. Um, And it's also, you have to realize how big the possibility of life is, you know. Now you have people like Elon Musk, you know, who's planning to do something in Mars, who wants to go multiplanetary. So I think you have to understand, okay, this is the reality of life. There are people who are thinking beyond. So why can't you see yourself in that in those scenario? You know,
Mm,
so I always like to believe that I could achieve something in life. This was always my, to be honest, my motivation in life, because I knew a possibility. You see people like
yeah,
Steve Jobs, you see people like those, and you feel like, okay, you could be that also. You
yeah,
know, so of course, number one thing is you have to understand that you can become that person. Okay.
yeah,
And number two, also, you have to understand there's not going to be a lot of problems, to be honest. It's not always a good day, good life. So sometimes you might feel very bored about life. You might feel you have very low energy. You might feel you have so many problems in life. But you have to understand, you know, the moment you feel, you know, you can't, if you don't feel trust with yourself, you're finished.
mm,
You know, so I always have this moment when I feel grumpy, when I feel this and that. But at the same time, I realize, okay, Nima, you have done so much to come here. You can still do it. You know, so that's how I
yeah.
always push myself. And yeah, mentally, I think I've always kind of been aware of what I can do as a human being. And yeah.
Do you have to practice that even when you're not on the mountain? Like, and by the way, does practicing that when you're not on the mountain translate to at least successfully being mentally strong and peaceful when you are on the mountain?
Yes, I think that's a very big part, and the most I found the best way actually to do this is to learn. The more you learn, the more you realize you don't know anything, and
Mm,
and the more you want to learn, the more you want to push. You know, for example, I have so many books. If you see on my table itself, so for example, right now I'm reading this book which is called Man of Everest. It's of Tenzin Norgay
wow.
Sherpa.
Yeah.
Then I have this book of winter climbing, and then there is so many books like from one of this is I got just from like this is Shah Rukh Khan biography, and then you have
Yeah.
Miyamoto Musashi. So I think you have to keep a very learning mentality, and the more, as I told you, the more you learn, the more you want to learn, and the more you know that you don't know anything about life. That's what makes you feel integrated every day. You want to wake up and you want to learn something more, and that's, I think, what makes you mentally also strong. The fact that you have so much to improve. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, just this constant growth mindset. And whether it's learning from others, but so many who are currently learning from you, so excited about what you've accomplished and all that's ahead. Nima, thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation. And we wish you all the best. And I hope we can join you. I hope you can join us again down the road.
Yeah, thank you, Abhi. I think this was a very chill, like kind of like a podcast conversation for me. uh,
Awesome. Awesome. You're listening to Trust Me, I Know What I'm Doing. Stay tuned.